So, Representative Fontenot, before we get started,
Yes, sir.
we've gotten to the part of the program where the emotions and all of the heightened testimony will start to come. So I just want to, remind everyone we are going to be really strict on the 3-minute rule. We ask that you limit the repetitive nature of your comments and recognize that we all have differences of opinions, but we all respect those opinions, and let's keep a level of civility. I've been in this committee a very long time, so I know how these bills go. So let's just remember and respect everyone's opinions and positions, and know that we like gumbo, and today you're gonna see it. You're gonna see the differences, and you're gonna see everything compiled into this room today. So let's just remember that. Representative Fontenot on House Bill 596.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, fellow members of Criminal Justice Committee. Before we get started, I'd like to offer up a set of amendments that were made public this morning in reference to 596.
Attorney Becknell.
This is Amendment Set 1153, and what these sets of amendments do, they make technical changes to the citations, expands the list of provisions that a person would be prohibited from possessing a firearm. It specifies that a Louisiana resident who meets the proposed law provisions shall not be required to possess a permit. And it further specifies that proposed law provisions shall not affect present law reciprocity requirements. It also specifies that no individual carrying pursuant to proposed law may carry while under the influence of alcohol or a controlled dangerous substance. And it further specifies that a person carrying pursuant to proposed law shall notify the officer when approached in an official manner that he has a weapon on his person, submit to a pat-down, and allow the officer to temporarily disarm him. And lastly, this set of amendments requires the state police to maintain and make available to the public a database of all licensed handgun and firearm instructors.
Thank you, Ms. Eddy. In real short, members, in communication with the respectable parties that have interest in this matter, including Senator Morris, we added some language that would mimic Senator Morris's bill, which subsequently came off the Senate floor yesterday, which talks about your blood alcohol concentration. It talks about notification to law enforcement officers if you come into contact. It also does two other initiatives. The first one is that it mandates state police to keep a record database of all firearms instructors, licensed firearms instructors in the state of Louisiana, so individuals choosing to search for firearms instructors can find them there. In addition to, it mandates them to create a training program, but that training program would only be made available on a voluntarily basis and not a mandatory basis.
Representative Fontenot has offered up an amendment. Is there any objection to the adoption of the amendment? Hearing none, the amendment is adopted. Representative Fontenot, on your amended bill, I see you have a guest. You want him to speak now? You have several guests, but the one at the table.
I'll defer to Dan here in a second, but just real briefly on the bill, I think we see across America as legislative bodies across this country look at the effects of gun violence. They look at the will of the people. They look at what our founding fathers wrote in the Constitution. And for years, legislative bodies have put restrictive measures in place that hamper our rights and freedoms to keep and bear arms. As we sit here today, there are 19 states in the country that have allowed for the possession of carrying 20. 20 states now have allowed for the possession and carry of a concealed firearm without any permit. I think there's good arguments on both sides, and of all the bills that I've carried so far here in this body, this is the one that I've done the absolute utmost research on, studying the effects of gun violence. Does it drive crime up? Does it drive crime down? I think there's going to be arguments both ways. But essentially, my bill removes all the prohibitions to carry a concealed firearm. If you do not violate Louisiana statute and you're not prohibited from carrying for subject to 95E, or you're a convicted felon, this would allow you to carry a concealed firearm without any background check, without any mandatory training, or without paying any subsequent fees to the state of Louisiana to carry such firearms. I would say this as we go back to the amendments. The original proposal in this bill mandated a specific training. And my personal experience tells me that you should not possess a firearm without having some type of training. As many of you know, in my own personal career, the use of deadly force is very personal to me. I've worked with the law enforcement professions to come up with some language, and the respectable parties. I would tell you that my personal experience is that you should have mandatory training. But I was elected by a swath of individuals who disagree. I represent the people, and the people's voice has been heard in my ear that training should not be mandatory. It should not stand in the way of your constitutional right to keep and bear arms. With that said, I did make my training voluntarily. And some people would say, well, why would you have a training available? I think about the 55-year-old lady who becomes a victim of domestic violence. She chooses to purchase a firearm at 5 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. This gives her the ability to get on state police's website free of charge, look at some type of knowledge on a handgun, understand things like nomenclature, use of deadly force, civil liability. But more importantly, if we're going to allow people in the state of Louisiana to carry a firearm concealed, there are specific laws that those individuals still must follow. So it gives them the knowledge they need so they don't subsequently go violate Louisiana law and understand the dangers of carrying a firearm. Again, I think our founding fathers were real clear. I think the United States Supreme Court has said over and over again, I feel like they're going to say it as they take up the case in New York, that we have a right to keep and bear arms. It's a real difference between carrying in the state of Louisiana, open carry, where someone carries a firearm that is visible and it's legal, and you put on a coat and subsequently it becomes illegal. This is a real simple measure that lets law-abiding citizens keep and carry firearms. This doesn't affect those people who are criminals. This doesn't give them any more advantages. I believe that criminals will choose to break the law. This is about giving rights that this body took away from law-abiding citizens. It gives them the right to keep a firearm without any further trainings, background checks, or limitations. Mr. Dan?
For those who don't know me, my name is Dan Zelenka, and I'm the president of the Louisiana Shooting Association. And I'm here on behalf of our members in support of House Bill 596 because it is a law whose time has come. There's been a wave of permitless concealed carry laws enacted across the United States. There are currently 20 states with constitutional carry, that's the popular name of permitless carry, constitutional carry laws in effect, and bills are pending in 6 others. Constitutional carry has been the law of Vermont for 230 years. Our neighbors Mississippi and Arkansas have constitutional carry, and Texas's House recently passed a bill which is pending in their Senate. You can travel from West Virginia to Idaho or from the Mexican border to the Canadian border without leaving a state with constitutional carry. Some people predicted problems when shall issue concealed carry permitting became law in 40 states. Those predictions have become unfounded. The 20 states that have constitutional carry have experienced no more issues than carry permit states, which is to say very, very few issues. Louisiana is not stepping into the unknown. There is a track record upon which we can rely. We have a good permit system, and it will stay in place. Permits provide reciprocity for carrying in other states and exempt you from a background check when you buy a firearm. People will still want permits. They also allow you to go in a restaurant that has an alcoholic beverage license that you could not do with a under constitutional carry. So the question is, why permitless carry? Obtaining a concealed carry permit costs between $225 and $325 between the required training and the fee for the permit. It also requires you to travel to and attend a 9-hour class. The cost of a permit in money and time disproportionately impacts economically disadvantaged populations who unfortunately often live in areas with higher crime rates, which means they have a greater need for self-defense. The permit system creates a financial barrier to exercising their constitutional right. People who are against this bill may claim that it will allow criminals to carry a firearm. This is false. In fact, anyone who is prohibited from purchasing a firearm, and with the current amendments, anyone who is prohibited from obtaining a concealed handgun permit would be prohibited from carrying a handgun under this bill. The prohibited persons include convicted felons, convicted domestic violence abusers, people adjudicated mentally incompetent, habitual drug users, including marijuana, habitual alcoholics, people convicted of misdemeanor violent crimes, fugitives, illegal aliens, people with a dishonorable discharge, or people with a history of violent behavior.
30 seconds, Mr. Lincoln.
Oh, goodness. This bill requires you.
You can stop at it. You don't have to go 3 minutes.
Yeah, I got more to say.
I know. Go ahead.
Bill requires that you not be under the influence of alcohol or a controlled dangerous substance, and violations of the limitations is a violation of RS 1495, which is the concealed illegal carrying of weapons statute, as well as 401382, which is the negligent carrying of a firearm statute. The areas of the country that support the right to keep and bear arms are moving toward constitutional carry. Louisianians who overwhelmingly pass the strongest constitutional right to keep and bear arms of any state should not have any less freedom. I'm here to take any questions that you guys might have.
Thank you. Representative Marcel.
First of all, let me say hello to my colleague, Representative Fontenot,
Good morning, Representative
and
Marcel.
tell you that this bill seriously concerns me. Permitless carry, if this passes, how does law enforcement know the difference between what you all keep referring to as law-abiding citizens? Do they have something on their face, a sticker or something that say I'm a law-abiding citizen, versus somebody that has a criminal elements? Help me with that. Help me to just, for the law enforcement office, you pull them over, because I think part of your bill says that they need to identify themselves as, hi, I'm a permitless carry person, right?
Yes, ma'am. So I guess
Correct.
to the first
So it's
part,
self-reporting to the officer, right?
that is correct. It says in his official capacity. So if an officer was conducting some type of traffic stop or investigation,
They do that every day, right?
that is absolutely. And right now, every day that people who have concealed carry permits are possessing a firearm, they must notify a law enforcement professional that they have that such firearm. But getting to your point, well, how do a law enforcement officer know if someone's a law-abiding citizen? I think it's a sequel to say, how do you know that they're a criminal? Criminals don't walk around with something on their head that says,
Correct.
I've been convicted. Police
Correct.
are entitled to do investigations and determine if probable cause exists and someone has a firearm in their possession. I would expect that law enforcement would do an investigation to determine if you legally can possess that firearm or not.
I just believe that this puts law enforcement at a disadvantage, and it's my understanding that they are opposing this bill. Is that your understanding?
That is correct. And let me say that it's very difficult for me to go against the law enforcement professionals. Louisiana State Police said in the Senate several times that there will be no mass crime initiatives. Crime will not rise. If you look at the fiscal note, it says they'll lose $4.5 million, for which it only costs $700,000 to run that section of their agency. The people of
That
Louisiana.
was the next thing I was going to ask you about.
So what we have is the people of Louisiana are paying for permits to fund Louisiana State Police, and they are
And I'm
underfunded.
running out of time, so I know Ted's going to cut me off. So let me get my other point in about domestic violence. I heard you say that you're doing this for the lady who may be a victim of domestic violence. She goes out and she buys a firearm, but there's no training available to her. And so what happens if she's not trained, right, on the firearm, and then her abuser takes the gun from her and kills her? Worst case scenario, you're not trained, you start shooting, you just shoot an innocent bystander. I mean, when you pull a trigger, they have life-altering effects on someone's life. And so we can't send people out here in the state of Louisiana, because 2 other states did it, and I don't particularly like what they do in their laws anyway, and cause harm to maybe a citizen, a child. We are putting people in danger when we start talking about permitless carry for people who are not trained to use that weapon. And so that's why I'm opposing this bill. I think we're opening up ourselves to something that we're not, maybe that's the unintended consequences of your bill. But certainly it's something that we need to look at. And one final question. Senator Morris's bill, is it the same as yours?
It is the same, with the exception that my bill makes a training program available at no cost.
So it's just available. So the state of Louisiana will lose the money that they're charging right now to train people, and the for the permits, correct?
Well, look, statistics show us in states that have permitless carry, the process to get a permit will still be in place. There is no documentation to say that those people who have permits are going to decrease or people won't go get permits. In fact, in other states, the obtaining of a permit has actually risen. So to say that state police may lose $4.5 million is truly just a myth. They may actually get more people that
Well,
get
I'm not
that
as,
permit.
and I'm wrapping it up. I'm not as
you got like
concerned
5 more
about.
seconds.
I'm not as concerned about the $4 million as I am the safety of the officers who are stopping people, and they have to self-report, and they're not going to be able to determine if they see a gun bulging out of somebody's pocket or back or jacket. They're not going to be able to determine whether that's a law-abiding citizen or a permitless carry, and that's all I have.
No,
Thank
no,
you. Representative Bacala.
That's distinguishable by the individual's actions. A law-abiding citizen who carries a firearm is not going to threaten a law enforcement professional. But to get to your point about those statistics, let me remind you, Representative Marcel, you don't just represent some of the most violent places in Louisiana. You represent a city that is the most violent in the country. We have talked over and over in this committee about disadvantaged individuals, those from the black and browns community. This is a bill to help them. This is a bill for those people who are honest, people who voted for you, that they can go protect themselves in one of the most violent cities in the country. They don't have to have training. They don't have to have a background check. They can immediately protect themselves and conceal their firearms.
I did, and I think that I cut it off at the right time. And I'm going to withhold my own statements about the beloved capital city right now. And I will reserve them till the end. Representative Bacala.
I think I got 30 seconds left. So if we would, maybe I can ask you yes and no questions and we can move through pretty quickly. Right now, what we're calling a law-abiding citizen can carry a weapon, open carry now.
That is correct.
So any complications about whether that person can carry or not carry as far as their prior criminal record is in existence now. We're not creating a new complication. That exists today,
But when someone
correct?
purchases a firearm now, they have a background check.
No, but I'm saying if a law enforcement encounters somebody carrying a not concealed firearm, they have to try to make a determination whether they're legally or illegally carrying based on their prior criminal record, correct?
That is correct.
So that's not really a complication any more than we have now, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, what we have here today and what you offer in its amended form is basically what is called constitutional carry, the only addition being that the state police would create a 60-minute online training course available to anybody who cares to watch, but not required.
That is correct.
Okay, Mr. Chair, at the appropriate time, I would move favorable on this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Representative Muscarello. Oh.
Mr. Chair, there was mention of law enforcement being opposed to this bill. Are there any official law enforcement entity red cards on this bill? My understanding is law enforcement official position was neutral.
Yeah, I don't have any red cards from law enforcement.
Thank you.
I was going to address that later.
Okay,
as well.
Thank you for addressing it now, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Representative Seabaugh. No. Okay. Hold on, Representative Seabaugh. There we go. Okay.
Yeah, I had accidentally hit Representative Muscarello's button. Thank you for bringing this bill. And I want to get a clarification. I think you've explained this, but when I first read the bill, the requirement, it originally required the 60-minute course. And my question was going to be how you would prove that. Were you required to carry some kind of certificate showing that you took the 60-minute course, which would be essentially like a permit? But you've taken that out of the bill, correct?
That's correct. Yes,
so
sir.
the program is going to be available. So anybody, like the person that Representative Marcel was describing that buys the handgun for self-defense, will have training available through this video that they can go get, correct?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Okay. And I think that's a very good improvement to the bill. The other one was I just want a clarification. I think you did this one too, but we're not doing away with concealed carry permits.
That is correct. We keep reciprocity in place for those individuals who, one, choose to get a more extensive training, an 8-hour training, and those who wish to travel outside of the state of Louisiana with a concealed carry.
And the concealed carry also, I live 20 miles from Texas. I travel into Texas all the time, and it's nice to know that when I cross the state line, the law doesn't change because my permit allows me to carry in Texas just like it does in Louisiana. And we're not taking that away, so that option would still be available, correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Also, look, I think this is a bill that is a long time coming. The Second Amendment literally says to keep and bear arms. Bear literally means to carry. So I think the right to carry is enshrined in the U.S. Constitution. And I'm not aware of a permit required to exercise your right to free speech guaranteed by the First Amendment, or the right to exercise freedom of religion also guaranteed by the First Amendment. I've never understood why you are required to get a permit to exercise a right clearly guaranteed to you by the U.S. Constitution. So I clearly support your bill. If Representative Bacala had not already moved favorable, I would do so, and I want to thank you for bringing it.
I appreciate it, Representative Seabaugh. And again, the studying on this bill took a lot of twists and turns for me, all the way to the fact of trying to understand what our founding fathers meant when it said the right to keep and to bear arms. Those words and what they meant to the founding fathers, which is exactly how I got to making the training voluntarily.
Thank you. I appreciate you bringing the bill, and I appreciate the amendments.
Thank you.
To Representative Bacala's question, we do have law enforcement that are opposed. We have the Chiefs of Police Association. They have red cards. I was only looking at the ones that wish to speak, so I stand corrected. We do have some law enforcement opposed to the bill. Representative Marino.
I think Representative Fontenot, we might have even done the course together. I do have a concealed carry permit. I went through the state police, and I went through the training. What is, but just for the people that don't know, what is exactly taught? Maybe Mr. Zelenka could say, what is taught at the state police concealed carry class? What are they actually teaching?
We actually have somebody that can better address that, but in general...
Mr. Zelenka, get closer to your mic, please, sir.
Sorry about that. In general, it's use of force laws, the laws concerning concealed carry itself, nomenclature concerning a firearm, and then there is a 36-round live shooting exercise.
And also a safety aspect as well of how to safely...
Sure, that's
right.
included in the nomenclature
right.
portion.
I mean, Representative Fontenot, that is where you lose me on your bill, is that you're not requiring that. I don't feel that is an unreasonable or burdensome requirement to have concealed carry, to go through the training on use of force laws, gun safety, actually firing the gun. With respect to your original bill, I recognize that you did put some type of training in. You wanted them to do an online certificate.
Yes, sir.
Because I assume that you believe people should be trained on how to carry and safely and use of deadly force.
Look, I reiterate my position with you, Representative Mito. First, I am a Louisiana firearms instructor. I've taught thousands of police officers concealed handgun, and I concur with you. I concur that people should get training to carry a firearm. The difference is we have to make a judgment on what is our constitutional right, and should the government mandate training to exercise our constitutional right. I would tell you that if I was a firearms instructor, I would refer everyone to get a training, and I hope that everyone chooses, and these people behind me probably have millions of hours of training. So training is important. I'm emphasizing training. I'm making something available to the people, but I do concur with you. People should have training.
But the problem that I have with the bill, which I'm sure you're aware, is one, we're removing the requirement of any type of background check, and more importantly, we're removing the training aspect. And in just saying that you encourage it or want people to do it does not mean that people are going to do that. I mean,
look, I don't think we got any criminals walking around that's got any training. So we have to give the right to people to protect themselves.
Right.
I mean, I apologize.
Excuse me.
An applause, but
yeah, and hold on, Representative Fontenot. I know that sometimes I want to clap sometimes too, but I'm gonna ask that we just kind of hold it down just a little bit and do like we could snap a little bit or just kind of air clap. I didn't want to clap that time, but sometimes I do want to clap.
I understand, but you understand why I'm a no on this.
1,000%.
Thank you.
Can I
yes, sir,
address something? Representative Marino.
Yes.
Currently, there are 31 states that allow open carry, carrying a firearm openly without any training. There are 20 states that allow constitutional carry, so concealed carry of a firearm without any training. And then there are 6 additional states that issue permits without training. So the majority of America, you can carry a firearm concealed without training and
Right.
certainly open without training.
Right, but I don't get to vote on those.
I understand, but I just wanted, we're not that far out on a limb or anything is what I'm trying to explain.
Thank you.
Okay.
No, I agree. And just to reiterate, training is important. I wouldn't support a bill or any law that doesn't offer some type of training to the citizens.
Thank you.
Representative Bryan.
B, your bill goes against the Constitution, and you keep on throwing the Constitution up and what the Founding Fathers say. But the Founding Fathers say a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
I agree.
Regulated. You're actually trying to deregulate.
I disagree, Representative Bryant.
Well, why are you not? Why, if you're trying to take a law away that regulates an industry to protect the people and its intent, and you're trying to take it away instead of add to it, that is the definition of deregulation,
No,
and
I
that
think
is what the Constitution says not to do. It says regulate, not deregulate. So why are you not? What would make you think you're not deregulating this by taking this away and saying everybody can walk around with a gun concealed?
So, in reference to what you said about the Constitution and it being a well-regulated militia, is that what it says, sir?
Yes.
So these people who sit behind me right now, sir, this is a well-regulated militia. The
Yes, 'cause the
regulation
law
that they couldn't.
applies
Hold on,
to
let me
them.
finish, sir. The regulation that they couldn't carry a firearm in the state capitol exists. The restrictions are there for them not to carry here. So there are regulations that are in place. You cannot be a convicted felon and keep a firearm or possess a firearm. So there still are regulations in place. Do you believe that laws are made for honest citizens or for criminals?
I think when the Constitution says and the founders that you keep on referring to say regulated, and we regulate it, and you come in and say, no, let's not regulate it, you're going against the Constitution that you actually keep on referring to. Right. Taking away this and allowing people to walk around is not making black and brown people safe. Let us make laws that make black and brown safe. That's why we came up here to do that. You're doing things that's going to make it very harmful and dangerous in our communities when we see people in our communities die every day. Right? And there's nobody in my community in here right now saying, thank you, Brother Fontenot, for doing this because we need it.
Mm-hmm. And look, I respect your
community.
position.
Black and brown. That's what he's talking about.
But we go back to what I referenced to Representative Marcel. We currently have 3 of the highest homicides.
Sir, hold on, sir. Like, look, everybody in here, I think, except for one middle school student, is over 18. I'm gonna ask that we act like it. The jumping up and down, pointing, pulling up your shirt. We not doing that in here. I'm gonna ask you to leave. Period. We got a young man here that goes to McKinley Middle. He's like 13 or 14. Let's not give him his first experience in his body with us acting the way that we're acting. Please. Representative Bryan, on your question, Representative Fontenot, you can't ask Representative Fontenot questions from Representative. You can't ask him questions from there, right? So I know it's hypothetical, but let's civility, please. Representative Bryan, are you done with your questions?
I'm just trying to figure out why you're saying you're not deregulating this area of the law by taking it away when the Constitution says regulate.
I don't think it should ever have been put on, sir. I think this legislative body was wrong to put it on. But and I also think that there is no scientific evidence to indicate that your community is going to become more violent. I think you'll hear testimony today from some of the most renowned scientists that looked at the gun safety. And if we add more guns, will violence erupt? There's no evidence to support that. You'll hear from an author, Mr. John Lott, who says more guns and less violence. But the government just didn't accept that. In response to Lott's book, a 16-member panel of the United States National Research Council was convened to address the issue of whether the right to carry laws influence crime rate. They also looked at many other gun control measures, including the soon-to-expire 1994 assault ban on gun buybacks. In 2014, they issued a report, Firearms and Violence, a Critical Review, which examined Lott's statistical methods in detail, including computation of statistical uncertainties. What they found is there is no scientific data to support, if we have more firearms carried by legal citizens, that crime is going to rise in rural areas or urban areas or black areas or white areas or Hispanic. There's no data to support that, Representative. And I've done a lot of research. I'm not telling you that they support data that says crime's going to go down, because you're going to probably hear testimony today that says crime's going to go down. I'm going to tell you that that data that I researched, I'm not giving a biased opinion. It's level. Things aren't going to go crazy. It's not going to be the Wild West, and crime may not go down. It's going to stay just like it is. When we're talking about crime in your communities, it's a serious issue in this state. Do you understand we are the 6th highest crime-riddled state in the country?
I do.
People deserve the right to protect themselves when we live in such a violent place, without the restrictions of government.
I just respectfully disagree.
We're gonna go to Representative McKnight, because I'm about to be real strict on the 3-minute rule. And Representative Fontenot, I know you passionate. Save some of that for your closing. All right, come on, Representative McKnight.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Fontenot, as you know, we've had many discussions on this. I'm also a firearms instructor and train many people. I 100% believe that people should go get the proper training, should understand what they're doing. But let me ask you this. State of Louisiana is an open carry state?
Yes, sir.
Are you required to have any training to open carry?
No, sir.
In the state of Louisiana, can you concealed carry a firearm currently in your vehicle?
Yes, sir.
Do you have to have training to do that?
No, sir.
So we're currently, where most people are carrying in their vehicles, open carrying in the public, we're not requiring training there, but we're pushing this training requirement so hard everywhere else. So I agree with you. I hope that people go get trained, but I 100% agree with your bill, and I'm going to be supporting it.
I appreciate it. And again, I'm trying to make it readily available, accessible, where people can get a piece of training and they can search for firearms instructors that are within X amount of miles from their residence.
Thank you, Representative McKnight. Gentlemen, I'm going to ask that you vacate the table and let's get some testimony. I'm going to call up my friend, Mr. Mike Weinberg, first. Call him up first, Home Defense Foundation, and then Barry Kendrick with Louisiana Shooting Association. You could join my good friend Mike at the table. 3 minutes, gentlemen.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask permission for this to be distributed?
Yeah, we'll make sure it gets out. Yeah.
So I'll be very brief. My name is Mike Weinberger. I'm the founder of the Home Defense Foundation. That's most of the red shirts out there. I think there are a couple of red shirts that are not with us, but most of the red shirts are with us. And I'm the co-founder with Chris Patrone of the Firearm Professionals of Louisiana. Those are the purple shirts. I'm a retired businessman and lawyer, a recovering lawyer, I sometimes say. I'm also a licensed firearm instructor, and I'm the author of this book, Your First Concealed Carry, so I've taught a bunch of people. Most of the points that I would have said have already been made by the other speakers. I'll simply say one other thing. My wife does not have a concealed carry permit. And her office, until very recently, was in downtown New Orleans. And sometimes she worked late, and I saw the parking lot where she parks. And it is not a safe place. She goes up to the 4th or 5th level. She's by herself when she comes out at night. And I beg her to get a permit to carry a firearm in her purse. She keeps on saying, I will. She's very, very busy. I would like her to have the right to defend herself, to put a firearm in her purse without asking for the government's permission. And I think she's entitled to that. I think it's a God-given right. And I think if we pass Representative Fontenot's bill, she'll have the right. So I ask for passage.
Thank you. That's the shortest I've ever heard you speak. Go ahead.
Good morning again, Barry Kendrick with Louisiana Shooting Association. I'm not going to try. We're going to try not to rehash anything that's been talked about, but I did want to bring up one thing when it comes to open carry of firearms. As talked about, no training, no background check, no governmental permission to be able to open carry a firearm. But I think one of the biggest reasons that people need and want to be able to cover it up is because having the firearm carried in the open can also force the use of the gun. Meaning if somebody has it completely concealed, they have the option on whether or not that they would be using the firearm. And most of the time, people choose not to use guns in all kinds of different situations. But when the gun is present and it's visible, it becomes a provoker to different individuals, and it can push the use of a gun when somebody may have made a decision not to use it in the first place had that firearm been concealed. The training, just like has been mentioned many a times, I do believe that training is important. We do have to understand that, at least according to one RAND study last year that was released, what they found is there was zero evidence that showed that mandatory training had either a positive or a negative.
Put your mic closer.
That mandatory training had a positive or a negative effect on outcomes, on negative outcomes. Whether we were talking about kids getting hurt with guns, or you're talking about people using guns negligently in a public environment. Any of those risk factors that they looked at, that they found that mandatory training, they didn't find any evidence that it had a positive impact or a negative impact with it. Some people already have training, but they haven't gone to the official signed-off Louisiana concealed carry permit instructor to get the certified approved to training to be able to get the concealed carry permit. So if someone all of a sudden, faced a legitimate risk in their life, as was talked about, right, whether that's domestic violence or, they just fired an individual the day before, and now that person's making serious threats to their life, if that person has already had the training, why should they not be able to legally carry that firearm on that person from that moment moving forward? And when we're talking about guns, is that I believe that people will get training. Is that if you look at the constitutional carry states that have already passed training, it's not like permits have gone away. Some instructors are a whole lot more busy than they used to be because it drives interest. And people recognize that guns are a serious discussion. And that by carrying a firearm, they recognize that they could be, be using the gun in such a way that could hurt them or someone else. As someone who hasn't had the training is more likely to go out and get the training, not because the government mandated it, because simply they recognize that that's a responsibility. And so in the states that I've traveled to and that I teach in, I haven't found any less students available coming into classes when I go to states that have constitutional carry. Last year, between COVID shutdowns, between government system computers, the state police wasn't even able to process.
I ask that you wrap it up. You're over 3 minutes now. 3:06.
Time matters. Thank you for the time this morning. I do ask that you move favorably.
Thank you. No questions. Matt Harriman, I'm sorry. National Rifle Association. Joshua Burnhill, Gun Owners of America.
You want me to go first?
Please do.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. I'll try to be brief and hold it to not be redundant. So I want to thank you for the ability to
identify yourself first.
Okay. For the record, my name is Matt Harriman. I am the state director for Louisiana for the National Rifle Association. I want to thank you for the opportunity to address you on this issue, which clearly is very important to the citizens of this state, evidenced by the hundreds of people here today. On behalf of our members, I want to publicly thank Representative Fontenot and Representative McCormick, who will be up here later, for taking the lead on this issue. This is an effort that the NRA has led the fight on in states across this country, including the recent successful efforts in Utah, Montana, Iowa, and Tennessee. We are in strong support of House Bill 16 and House Bill 596 as amended. My goal today is to provide you with some facts around permitless carry for those states that have opted for this policy, and hopefully dispel some myths that you have or will hear at some point. The first thing is, which this has been talked about, is this is not a new or uncommon thing. Louisiana is already a permitless open carry state without any training for 18 and up. Really, this boils down to people being able to, law-abiding citizens being able to throw on a jacket or untuck a shirt. That's what this boils down to. The second thing is, permitless carry is not going to allow prohibited persons to carry or buy guns. This legislation does not change any of those laws any law governing the misuse of a firearm. Third, states enacting permitless carry legislation have not and do not devolve into the Wild West. Opponents in every state, this will happen here today, say that this is the end of days and lawlessness is going to ensue to epic proportions. These claims are simply not true. Just look at the other 20 states that have enacted this, particularly Arizona, which has a similar population in metro areas. The fourth thing is people still apply for permits. There's been some discussion about this. And the final thing here is, and we know this, criminals already carried conceal without regard for the law. And this legislation is not for them. This is not going to change that. So with that, Mr. Chairman, appreciate your guys' time and would ask for favorable passage.
Thank you. You have 15 seconds to spare.
All right.
Good morning. My name
You don't get his 15 seconds.
Oh, that's all right. I will need it. My name is Josh Barnhill. I am the Louisiana Director for Gun Owners of America. I'd like to thank you all for this opportunity to speak in support of Representative Fontenot's constitutional carry bill 596. A lot of things, pretty much everything I was going to say has been covered. So I just want to reiterate that, like Representative Fontenot said, our rights are God-given and unalienable. They cannot be limited, taxed, delayed, or infringed. And to argue anything differently would treat our rights not as rights, but as privileges to be given out or withheld by the government as it sees fit. So, just close then. I want to thank you, Representative Fontenot, again for filing this bill, and Chairman James and the committee members for taking it up today. And I ask that you please support and pass HB 596 as amended. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. No questions. Mr. Everett, you're the last person to speak.
I think the substance of my testimony has been more than covered at this point. So
Thank you. He weighs. We appreciate that. I haven't been seeing you in the gym. You've been taking off? Oh, different gym. All right. Okay, so we have, that was the last card to speak. We also had 71 green cards in support that did not wish to speak. We will put those into the record. We had, this is House Bill 596. We had 134 emails in support. I'm going to bring up for information who would like to speak, the Colonel of State Police, Superintendent Lamar Davis. The Colonel walk out? Can someone ask Colonel Davis to come back in? No. Freeman. We also had President with State Police Jared Sandiford, Robert Burns, in addition to the Colonel who's on his way to the table. And I think he's bringing someone else with him. That's you have a card. That's Chief Murphy Paul, Baton Rouge Police Department.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning, Colonel.
Good morning, committee members, citizens of Louisiana. I'm Colonel Lamar Davis, Deputy Secretary of Department of Public Safety, as well as Superintendent of State Police. This morning I come before you as...
Colonel, can you pull your mic up a little bit? Thank you, sir.
This morning I come before you as a senior law enforcement officer of my agency, as well as a citizen that experienced a death associated with accidental shooting, a father of a 22-year-old, as well as a former concealed carry permit instructor. It is from this foundation that I express concern regarding the passage of this bill and other bills that seek to alter the current concealed carry permit measures. I know that you have numerous bills related to this matter, so out of respect for everyone's time, I'm going to basically address and provide my comments on this bill. Should you have any questions, I'll be available to entertain those questions at the appropriate time. As I mentioned before, as a 15-year-old, I remember going to school, being faced with the news that my 15-year-old friend was shot in the face by a relative who was handling a handgun. To the contrary, neither one were criminals. The relative of that 15-year-old was in legal possession of that weapon. However, he did not have the proper training. And that caused him to mishandle that weapon, causing the life of my 15-year-old friend. But I also served as a concealed gun carry instructor. And during that time, I experienced firsthand the level of knowledge, capability, and just the lack of concern for those seeking concealed carry permits. And I don't speak for every citizen that's going through this training. I don't speak for every instructor, so I know that. But I can tell you of my experience. And as an instructor, to be frank with you, I was very concerned with those that came before me seeking a concealed carry permit. But I felt greater as a result of providing that instruction. I felt better knowing that they understood the regulations, they understood the laws, they understood the do's and don'ts. But I also felt very good about them knowing how to manipulate that weapon. You know, when I get someone and we're going through the safety aspect of that training, and had we not provided them instructions on how to unload that weapon, many of them could have shot themselves right there on the range. Okay, it was that training provided to them that saved them from being injured and or killed, and others. So I think it's vitally important that we recognize that the training is important. There's a reason why we require the greatest military in the world to be trained on weapons. And again, serving in the military, I relish that training. But likewise, our law enforcement. Our citizens should be trained. That makes it safe for everyone. So that's a very important part. But also as a law enforcement officer, I can tell you firsthand the impact of this bill on our citizens and our law enforcement officers. There are many parts about this bill that concern me, but at the forefront is the permitting aspect of it and the training. When we get on the side of the road with a citizen, oftentimes they're already nervous as a result of that encounter. And when you add a weapon to the mix with a lack of training, then that makes it for a potential of having a negative impact, a negative outcome of that encounter. Okay, and that negative outcome could be on the side of the officer and or the citizen. So, you know, when we place concealed weapons in the hands of our citizens without proper training, without undergoing the permitting process, it increases the chances of those encounters becoming more adversarial and leading to them ending negatively. That's not what we wish to do as policymakers here. So with that said, given consideration of the climate that we're currently being experienced by law enforcement and our citizens, I would offer to you that this passage of this and similar bills will greatly and adversely impact the safety of our troopers, our officers, and our citizens. You know, much was said about the cost of the bill, cost of the training, time of it. So I would ask you, what is the cost of life, the life of our loved ones? What is the cost of the life of our friends? What is the cost of the life of our public servants who are out there day in and day out to defend us? Thank you again for your time, and I'll be here and available to speak. I'll turn it over to Chief Paul.
Thank you, Colonel. Chief Paul, 3 minutes.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Chief Murphy Paul, Baton Rouge Police Department, also a member of the Chiefs of Police Association. I'm not going to talk stats or anything. I think there's enough smart people behind us to give you that information. But what I want to talk about is policing in America today. Not just policing in America, which I think history would refer to this as the post-George Floyd era of policing, where we see reform all over the country. But what I'm asking you to consider today is my belief that this legislation is a public safety issue, and specifically, it is an officer safety issue. Policing is complex. There is nothing simple about it. And it is even more challenging today because every incident in America makes its way to every community in America because of social media. And when we have to train our police officers to deal with armed suspects, persons who are carrying concealed hand weapons, the current training that's provided educates them. It makes them aware on how to interact with law enforcement, what to say, what they can and what they can't do. That is an officer safety issue. Right now in America is a tinderbox. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of anxiety going on in America right now. You see it every day on your cell phones when you get alerts. It's not just about Baton Rouge. And what I am saying is that this bill will make that harder for our law enforcement officers who have to deal with the 21 or the 22-year-old young man who has a concealed handgun. And in those split-second decisions in the training that we provide to him, he has to make a determination on how to approach that individual. Right now, the training that's regulated by the Louisiana State Police guide those individuals with concealed handguns how to deal with our law enforcement officers. So I'm asking you to please do the right thing, not just about your community, but about all communities. This is an officer safety issue. Thank you.
And Chief Paul, just for clarification, you are providing information based on your experience as a law enforcement professional, correct?
Right, based on my 26 years of service with Louisiana State Police as a deputy superintendent and through the ranks, and also as the chief of police of a major metropolitan city.
Thank you, Chief. Representative Marcel.
Just thank you, Chief Paul. So is it your testimony that this bill would not help Baton Rouge with the high rate of crime that they're talking about?
Right. That is correct. It will not help. One thing, there is no separation of responsibility for a citizen nor a police officer. When that bullet leaves that weapon, you're accountable for it. That is why training is so important.
And so, yeah, that's what I said earlier. Once that bullet is released, we can't get it back.
That's correct, ma'am.
We can't get it back. And I say I want to thank you for coming to testify on behalf of the citizens, not only of Baton Rouge, but of the state of Louisiana, because I think we need regulations, and I think we need training, and I think we need to make sure that we're protecting the officers that are on the street every day. Thank you so much, Chief. Thank you so much to Mr. Colonel Davis.
Thank you, Representative Marcel. Chief, you did submit a white card, correct?
Yes.
You handed, okay. We don't have any further questions for you two gentlemen, but thank you all for coming. We're going to get to some of our red cards. Again, we had Fabian Blige, Kerry Cope, Kevin Hayes with Louisiana Chiefs of Police that are in opposition. Oh, they do not wish to speak. Hold on. We have a few cards that folks that are present and in opposition that do wish to speak. Angel Bradford, Moms Demand Action. If you can come down, and Sandy Brown representing herself. If you two ladies can come down. And while they're coming, we did have 17 emails in opposition and another 12 cards in opposition.
Good morning.
Ms.
My
Bryan.
name is Sandy Brown, and I can pass for the 58-year-old woman who's worried about her personal safety and that type of thing, though I am 68. But I want to address to you my...
You don't look a day over 35, Ms. Brown.
You need glasses.
I had LASIK. I see perfectly fine.
You need glasses. All right. I do want to address one issue. I have come face to face with someone carrying a loaded firearm pointed at me with the intent to shoot me. And that person was my father, a beloved father who cherished me and who I loved. That incident happened when two men were led into our home by my mother in an act of kindness to give them water. They turned on her, pulled a knife, and raped her. This happened when I was a 19-year-old student returning home from studying abroad. The family I left was not the family I returned home to. Violence had visited us in a terrible way, and my father got a gun to protect us. I had lived in that home 1 week before leaving. It was a brand new house my folks had moved into. And when I came home and heard that story, I was, of course, jet-lagged, upset, heartbroken, and I got up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night and bumped into a wall in a house I was not familiar with. Lived there a week. My dad came charging out of his bedroom with a gun pointed at me. He had had no training when he bought that gun. It was an emotional decision to buy a gun. We had never had one in our home before. He was a World War II veteran, too. He served in the Navy in World War II. So it's not like he wasn't in combat experience or things like that. But that gun did not keep our family safe when he bought it. It would not have protected my mother because she opened the door in an act of kindness. I don't understand this false story that guns keep us safe. They can also inflict harm in our homes and loved ones. The rate of suicide goes dramatically up when a gun is in the home. You may try to take pills that may fail if you take them or other ways, but suicide by gun is almost always fatal. I also am at a quandary to understand why, if people believe more guns keep us safe, we're not the safest country in the world, when we are not. We have more guns per capita than any other country in the world, and yet our murder rate per capita among our fellow developed countries is much, much higher, exponentially higher than any other country in the world. Now, I've traveled extensively. I've visited 40 countries, and I've spent a lot of time out of this one. And I can tell you I've walked the streets of many places, foreign capitals, throughout all of Europe, Central America, South America, different places. The issue of guns is not the same there as it is here. We are a heavily armed society, and we pay for it with a high murder rate. I have a final analogy I want to leave with you. If a plane fell from our skies every single day, and killed 95 to 105 people every day, if it fell on our schools, if it fell on shopping malls, public concerts, churches, your home, restaurants, Walmarts, Costco's, wherever you want to name, wouldn't we question why are planes falling from the sky killing 95 to 105 people every single day? Wouldn't we want to do something to look at alleviating that problem? Well, that's what's happening in the United States. Every day, that many people die across our country from gun violence. Every day. And so rather than making it easier to acquire guns, shouldn't we be looking at ways to make gun usage safer? I don't understand that disconnect at all. There's a lot of talk, too, about this being a God-given right. I am a very devout Christian, and I have participated in intense Bible study for 40 years. Nowhere in the scriptures does God say you have a right to carry a gun. In fact, Jesus, of course it didn't exist then, but Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane ordered Peter to put his weapon away when Peter drew it to defend Christ. we cannot say we're a God-fearing people
30 seconds, Ms. Brown.
and still support these things. So I just ask you to consider whether guns without training in a home would keep us safer. It did not keep me safe that night. Thankfully, I screamed. My father did not shoot. But it just added to the overall anxiety my family suffered. If you have any questions, you feel free to ask me.
We don't have any questions for you, but we do thank you for sharing your story with us. We know that's not easy, and thank God that you were able to be here with us today. So thank you for coming and sharing.
And I ask you to act with the same courage I act with when I tell that story. It is a very hard story to tell. It's not one I've told in public until last week when I told it at the Senate committee. But these things happen in real life, and it happened to me. And I ask that you show integrity and courage when you vote on this bill and not just react to whatever.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. And the members, no way, no matter how the members on this committee vote, I will assure you that everybody up here has a level of integrity and sympathy for not just your story, but every story. We hear a lot of stories at that table. So please don't think that your presence here and your story is not one that has touched us based on the vote. Ms. Bradford.
Hi, Angel Bradford, and I will add, bills like this are going to lead to more stories like Miss Brown's. So please be mindful of that. More and more of us are finding that we know folks that have either been killed by suicide or by gun violence. And if that's the future we want, this is the bill for that. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Angel, like I said, and I'm a volunteer with the Louisiana chapter of Moms Demand Action. I'm mostly going to read from my script because I am shaking because this is just a big deal today. I'm speaking to oppose HB 596, a dangerous permitless carry bill which would jeopardize public safety in Louisiana. Supporters of permitless carry will tell you that criminals don't follow laws and this bill only impacts law-abiding citizens. But that argument doesn't match up with the reality on the ground. We should make clear that permitless carry could embolden folks seeking to do wrong and make them feel more comfortable carrying in public. Our permitting system ensures people get a background check and some hands-on safety training, including actually firing a handgun before carrying a firearm in our communities around our families. What we must understand is that Louisiana's permitting system is the only background check a person may ever receive, and it's a piece of our system, a tool for law enforcement as well. Louisiana does not require background checks for firearm sales by unlicensed sellers, such as between strangers. In Louisiana, according to a report from Everytown, there's an average of nearly 7,000 posts for firearms available for sale by unlicensed sellers in Louisiana through one single website, for which no background check would be required. The report also found that across the country, 1 in 9 people who tried to buy a gun Across the country, 1 in 9 people who tried to buy a gun online were legally prohibited from having one, a rate 7 times higher than the denial rate at gun stores or in other contexts where background checks are required. So let's be clear. Criminals are indeed buying guns from unlicensed sellers because they can do so without a background check. Right now, if they bought that gun and carried it concealed in public without a permit, they would be breaking the law. By requiring a person to obtain a background check before getting a permit, law enforcement can use this tool to stop people with dangerous histories from carrying concealed guns in public. In fact, since the inception of Louisiana's concealed handgun permit unit in 1996, the department has either denied, suspended, or revoked nearly 14,000 permits. With the passage of this bill, that all goes away. While we want to make criminals feel more comfortable carrying in public, knowing they can now freely carry, no questions asked. Law enforcement opposes this bill because they understand that would be the new reality. Give law enforcement the tools to stop criminals from carrying guns in our communities. This bill would do the opposite. Law enforcement would be stripped of that tool. Listen to them. I've been coming here for years, and our folks that are willing to speak up and speak out have only gotten more diverse and representative of Louisiana. We were always told what do law enforcement believe, and they were here today. They told you what they believe. Listen to them, as they are the ones with real-world experience as to how this would complicate their jobs. Supporters will also say that supporters of this permitless carry bill will also say that permitless won't turn us into the wild, wild west. That's a pretty low bar and simplifies the very complex problem of gun violence that we have. They say emboldening criminals to carry guns, no question acts will somehow reduce crime.
I need you to start wrapping up on the 3-minute, please.
Okay.
Wrap up.
Here are the facts. States that have had permitless carry have experienced increases in violent gun crime specifically. Since Arizona enacted permitless carry legislation in 2010, the annual rate of aggravated assaults committed with a firearm in the state increased by 8%. Since Alaska enacted a permitless carry bill, which I often hear frequently reference to, the state has experienced a 65% increase in the annual rate of aggravated assaults with a gun. In our state, we already have the second highest rate of gun homicide deaths.
Ma'am, I need you to wrap up. Please.
In the U.S.
Please.
Okay. Gun deaths in the state have increased by 15% from 2010 to 2019. Firearms are the leading cause of death of children. We want to work with you to find solutions to these problems, but this bill will only make it worse. And I'll just stop there and finish with the next permitless carry bill.
Thank you. We have no questions. Next up, with wishing to speak in opposition, Nanette Oliver and Laura Devitt. And Ms. Karen White, you'll be up next if you can be prepared. And please introduce yourself before you speak. Either one.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm Nanette Olivier of Baton Rouge, and I'm coming here as a mother, a grandmother, and also as a member of Moms Demand Action. I'm speaking in opposition to this bill. The current system that we have in place helps to ensure that those who do choose to carry a concealed weapon have gone through a background check and have received training, and most notably in that training that is in existence today is the requirement that the person fire a live weapon. The bill being on the floor today removes the requirement of training, and it's now reduced to a 1 hour online training. And I looked at it. There are 4 subtopics that are covered, one of them being handling of a dangerous weapon. So I'm assuming there's approximately 15 minutes devoted to each subtopic of being trained to carry a deadly weapon. In our state of Louisiana, a very conservative state, 73% of the people oppose making it legal to carry a gun without a permit or without safety training. So I sit here baffled that there seems to be momentum in favor of passing such a bill which removes this requirement. Your constituents, 73%, and I've heard even higher numbers as of late, oppose what's in this bill. So I don't know who you're representing if you take a no vote on a yes vote on this. And I also want to speak about a comment I've heard repeated a number of times this morning, and that it is a person's God-given right to constitutional carry. In fact, I believe this morning I heard one of the representatives address the supporters in the hall this morning, an impassioned talk about it being a God-given right to constitutional carry. That is not my belief system. Furthermore, I think that's a dangerous proposition. We have had groups across the ages and across cultures who claim weapons as their God-given and God-driven rights, and I think that's dangerous territory. I would say that it's your duty to take a bill which to take a stance of no on this bill, to promote public safety. And one more quick comment. I'm a mother and a grandmother, and we are putting this stress on our children to bear. of gun violence in our communities. Those of us who grew up in the 50s, 60s, 70s in here, we did not experience that level of fear of gun violence in our community. And I think it's time for adults to take action on their behalf. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Devitt?
Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Laura Devitt, and I'm a mother of 2 young children ages 8 and 5 here in Louisiana. I'm here today to ask you to please vote no on HB 596 and HB 16 permitless carry bills. These permitless carry bills undo important safety measures that we have in our state for those who wish to carry a concealed weapon, as has been discussed. Those measures include a permitting process, background checks, and a training program that includes everything from learning to shoot the firearm to child access prevention. This is one of the most concerning parts of the bills for me. We talk a lot about common sense, but the truth is that not everyone will know how to ensure that children do not access firearms or know how to prevent unintentional shootings while carrying or storing a firearm. Research shows that an estimated 4.6 million American children live in a home with at least one gun that is loaded and unlocked. So common sense does not always prevail. I grew up in a house with guns, and while my parents thought they were taking every necessary step to keep us from accessing those guns and told us over and over never to touch them, I have a strong memory of my 10-year-old brother finding the key to the storage locker in my parents' bedroom and showing his friends one of my dad's rifles. Thankfully, my brother and his friends did not do more than just look at the gun, and no one was hurt. But things could have gone very differently that day. As the mother of 2 young boys, I know that telling them that they cannot touch something can cause them to gravitate and focus on that item. There is more than just common sense needed to ensure that a child can never access a firearm to prevent senseless tragedies. Training is needed. Over the most recent 5-year period from 2016 to 2020, there have been 82 unintentional shootings by children here in Louisiana. Those shootings have resulted in 58 injuries and 26 deaths. There have been 8 unintentional shootings identified so far this year in Louisiana involving children, resulting in 5 injuries and 3 deaths. 2 of those deaths were of 3-year-old children. We call these shootings unintentional instead of accidents because they are preventable. I want to know that the people around me and my children who are responsible for a firearm and concealing a weapon have been properly trained to ensure the safety of my children and of all children here in Louisiana. Taking away the concealed carry training today would take away one of the key processes we have in place to prevent unintentional shootings and unnecessary injury and death of our children here in Louisiana. Please vote no on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. How you say it?
Devitt.
Devitt. Thank you, Ms. Devitt. No questions. Next, Ms. Karen White.
Okay, really. Good morning, Mr. Acting Chair, committee members. Karen White, Executive Counsel for the Louisiana Municipal Association. We had not intended to come to the table today, but when Representative Fontenot amended his bill to take out the mandatory training element, it then mimicked Senate Bill 118, which we have opposition to as well, because we partner very closely with local law enforcement who, as Representative James said, does oppose this bill because training is essential. And it's not just what our boots on the ground people tell us every day about this being a public safety issue, but also statistics from people like the National Bureau of Economic Research that found the weight of evidence from states where they have passed these right to carry laws that crimes of violence have actually increased in the decade after adoption. So I don't agree that the statistics bear out that it's going to be a wash or a net zero. But I wanted just to bring, so that the committee may make an informed decision, a little bit of academic information. Namely, it's been alleged that the Second Amendment right to bear arms is not only God-given, but it cannot be infringed upon. And if we're going to say that constitutional rights cannot and shall not be infringed upon, then this legislative body has a lot of laws to repeal because we infringe upon those rights every day. One of the reasons why the right to free speech is number one is because it is cherished in one of the most important amendments. And yet there are 19 exceptions to the right to free speech, including things like obscenity, pornography, libel, slander, non-disclosure agreements, and on and on and on. We also have exceptions to the Fourth Amendment. The idea being that the rights that are articulated in the Constitution, as long as there is a legitimate reason and time, place, and manner of regulation, that they can be regulated. And so the laws that currently exist for concealed carry permit holders are and have been upheld as being reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions on the right to bear arms. So I wanted to make sure that we were very clear that it is not an unfettered right, and I am happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Ms. White. There are no questions, and we do have 2 additional people who wish to speak in opposition. If you'd come to the table, Caitlin Joshua and Michael Victorian.
Okay. Caitlin Bradford Joshua with Faith in Action, as well as Power Coalition. We do a lot around addressing gun violence on the local level, and even though this bill currently has absolutely nothing to do with that, it was brought up a couple of times about Baton Rouge being one of the most dangerous places in the country, which may be true, that it may be one of the most when you're looking at per capita, but we have over 45 states with a Faith in Action organization that's working on getting the guns out of folks that out of the hands of folks that shouldn't have them, and we do not encourage folks to have guns without proper training, background checks, etc. I know it was mentioned a couple of times today that as Karen actually stated, that crime does not increase, especially in some of the communities that were referenced today, and that's also not true. We've got substantial data and research done along with our science team in all 45 states that show crime does increase, especially in the Black and brown communities that were referenced earlier. Aside from that, there is a fiscal component. The cost of homicides, accidental injuries by minors due to firearms also drastically increases as a result of this constitutional carry or permitless carry. Last but not least, I know that it was also mentioned that certain communities or certain demographics might have a hard time obtaining the proper training or the background check or anything that you might have to go through. As a result, it has to be paid out of pocket. $300 is not a lot. In terms, or upwards of $300 is not a lot when we're talking about saving lives and making sure that people, especially folks with permitless carry, have the proper training to make sure that they're not harming others, and increasing the amount of accidental injuries that we will see going forward. Also, the law enforcement component that really spoke to me, especially because Faith in Action, we're a group of faith leaders that work closely with law enforcement to be able to address a lot of these issues with a community-based model. And while we are definitely in support of making sure that law enforcement has what they need to basically not have to go into a situation like a routine stop, assuming that someone is, a law-abiding citizen, however we're defining that today. We also know at Faith in Action, as we are a part of a lot of underprivileged, underserved communities, and we speak on behalf of them, we are already seeing a great deal of divide or issue amongst law enforcement encounters, different assumptions that are being had towards certain populations, and this bill is just going to increase that. And it's almost my time. Got you. So in closing, we are asking you guys to just pretty much sit and think for a second, what are we standing to gain with this bill? Because everything we've heard today is negative and would only, I guess, directly impact in a positive way law-abiding citizens, like I said, however we're defining that. So Caitlin Bradford Joshua, Faith in Action, asking you to vote no on this bill.
Thank you, Ms. Joshua. Michael?
Hello, I am the middle school student that Representative James referred to earlier. I'm here in opposition to House Bill 596 because, frankly, I think it's incredibly dangerous. Ability of someone to carry a firearm, no permit, no training. So many people talked earlier about what would happen if someone had a gun in their home with no training. What if they had children that were getting that weapon? But I wanted to say, what would happen if you had someone who had been radicalized, who had been on, let's say, 4chan, that's a message board that has a lot of neo-Nazis. What if someone had been radicalized? There would be nothing to stop them from buying a weapon with no training, no waiting period, no anything. There would be absolutely nothing to stop them from getting that weapon, concealing it, and then taking it to somewhere and committing terrible acts of violence against the people that they deem are not worthy of existence. I think of that example, but there are others. What if, what's to stop someone who is not, what's to stop a child? Because when you talked about these groups that are like disqualified from this, I didn't hear age mentioned. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't hear it. What's to stop me from going in, getting a firearm, and concealing it with no permit, no training? How much are we willing to give just to appease people who want to own guns without the government being involved? Because we're talking about lives. So I think it's a bit more than, well, these people 200 years ago would have wanted us to have guns. Well, times have changed. And I'm not against the Second Amendment, of course, but times have changed, weapons have changed, and like Representative Bryant said earlier, it means regulated. You need to regulate these things. And people have talked about, well, they don't regulate the First Amendment. One, they do, and two, words, for the most part, don't end lives on a regular basis. What was the number given earlier? 105 people a day killed by guns. So, why? And I want to circle back to my point.
Victoria.
Okay. What's to stop someone from just buying a gun and concealing it and committing horrible acts of violence? Because people have said, well, law-abiding citizens, criminals are going to criminal or whatever. But what about law-abiding citizens who become criminals because they bought these weapons and they had the ability to get these weapons and conceal them without the state knowing? So I urge the members of this committee to vote no on House Bill 596, and that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Victoria. I didn't know you were planning to speak. I thought you were just coming to visit today. You did great. I know your mom and dad are proud of your granddad back there. I had no idea he was going to speak. So thank you, Mr. Victorian, for your comments. I think that we've gotten, and thank you, Vice Chair, all of the members that were in opposition wishing to speak. We have another, I think, 12 cards in opposition that do not wish to speak. Representative Fontenot, come up to bring this matter to a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I get started, it'd be fruitless for me to not recognize the young man who sat at this table. Not only was he courageous to give his thoughts, he was analytical in his decisions and the way he delivered his message. The young man is extremely intelligent for his age. He stood above people that could sit here who can't talk. He is a beacon for what democracy is about. At his very young age, his voice is equal to you and I's. I thank him for being here, and he understands what democracy is about.
Thank you, Representative Fontenot.
As I close Mr. Chairman, the hardest thing I'll ever do in this chamber is to go against the law enforcement professionals. As a former law enforcement professional, everyone we come in contact, we believe has a firearm. Whether you're a law-abiding citizen or you're not, a law enforcement officer will ask to see your hands. They will treat everybody in that same manner until they investigate that traffic stop and understand what's going on. This won't change anything. This doesn't give criminals a greater opportunity to possess firearms. This won't increase crime. In 2008, the United States Supreme Court, District of Columbia versus Heller, reaffirmed our individual right to keep and bear arms for self-defense. There are 4 major law enforcement groups in this state: the Louisiana Fraternal Order of Police, the Louisiana Sheriff's Association, Louisiana Chiefs of Police, 2 of which were present today. And I have to tell you, throughout my career, I watched as Chief Murphy Paul rose through the ranks and made it to the place he is today. He has taken a city that was in the top 10 most deadliest and has made it a safer place. It hardens my heart to have to be against a law enforcement professional. But it's why I put in a training mechanism inside of this bill where people can get that training and understand how to interact with law enforcement. What do you do if there's an active shooter? What are the laws where you can and cannot carry? It is a tough decision to sit in this body and listen to people's heart stories, listen to law enforcement professionals, and balance what I believe our constitutional right is. I said this to Representative Marino. I have my own particular beliefs, but I represent 44,000 people just like you. And over 2,000 have called me, texted me, emailed me, and gave me their sentiment, which is why I offered the amendment to make it voluntarily. Officer safety has to be important. But when someone talks about gun violence, because we have more guns, that violence will go up. Let me remind you that Chicago has the absolute strictest gun laws in the country, and they are the highest crime-riddled place to live in America. Gun laws do not reduce crime. Gun laws reduce the rights of honest citizens. There are absolutely no facts to support that more guns will create more violence. Background checks will be needed. When you purchase a firearm, you will do a background check. My bill is 21 years of age. I believe it should be 21 because in America, 18, 19, and 20-year-olds are forbidden to buy firearms from licensed firearm dealers. I clearly respect every individual's position, our law enforcement positions, and even the healthy debate with my good friend Representative Bryan. I understand his position. When we go in the back, he can explain to me in intricate detail the problems that he faces in his community. When I got to this chamber, Mr. Chairman, I heard everything you said. It took me about 6 months to listen to you and to understand you were here fighting for what you believed in. For me, this is what I believe in. It's our freedoms, it's our rights to protect our families and our children. I know Representative Bagla has already moved for favorable passage, and I certainly hope that you would support us in this measure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Fontenot, and Representative Marcel has already objected, and I did text Representative Fontenot while I was out, and I did ask him if I could, just make a few statements because you know how, yesterday you mentioned the law enforcement officials that aren't here. Yesterday one sat there and asked the question when we were talking about marijuana, how much tax revenue is worth a life. And they aren't here today. And I get that their association didn't take a position, but, to have certain voices missing is troubling to me because I saw just in this committee when the testimony kind of went, got a little bit emotional, I saw a man of color in the back. And when they asked about Representative Bryan, about his community, he did that. And I thought about if we were out somewhere else and there was an issue, a confrontation, and that brother of color did that in a weapon. And I know that you doing it and him doing it may bring different reactions. And I worry. I do. I worry about because we just saw with a military veteran in full uniform. We saw what happened with his encounter with law enforcement, and I worry. I have no stats that this bill will lead to crime, but I do know the images that I've seen, and I worry about when someone of color is stopped and they initially say, I am carrying a weapon. I worry about how that next 30, 45 seconds will go. I do. And that's my concern here. And I know you and I have talked, and you and I have made a lot of headway in our just recognizing that we have different perspectives. So I appreciate the level of convictions and the passion and the tenor of your debate here. On this day is always been an emotional day in this committee. So I commend you for your thoughts and your beliefs, and I wanted to share with you mine. As you know, we are going to vote. Representative Bacala has made a motion to report the bill favorable as amended. Representative Marcel has objected. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Representative Bacala? Yes. Yes. Representative Bryant? No. Representative Fontenot?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Gudo? Yes. Representative Jones? No. Representative Marcel?
No.
No. Representative Marino? No. Representative McKnight? Yes. Representative Mascarello?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Nelson?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Seabaugh?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Villio? Yes. 8 yeas, 4 nays.
8 yeas, 4 nays. The bill is reported favorable. Congratulations, sir. As amended.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate it, but more importantly, I appreciate and respect our friendship. Thank you,
Sounds
sir.
good, brother. Thank you.